This is Live Well Talk on a day in the life of a house supervisor. I'm Dr. Dustin Arnold, Chief Medical Officer at Union Point Health, St. Luke's Hospital. Today is another installment in our podcast series of the team members that work here at the hospital. As we've said on other podcasts, people that work at the hospital aren't all doctors and nurses. My two guests today are both nurses, but they serve nursing in a different capacity, and we're going to talk about that. Joining me today are two of the house supervisors, Michelle Thompson and Jan Mussell. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank
Jan.
you.
How are you guys?
Doing well.
In all sincerity, I say this, and I do mean it when I say this. The toughest job in the hospital is the house supervisor, because you're dealing with so many different elements that some of them are expected and unexpected and bizarre things that happen, particularly you, Michelle, working the nights and the weekends.
Yes.
It's gotten harder, I think, over the years. But we wanted to get some insight into what a house supervisor does. So let's get started. You know, as I said, the house supervisor, nobody has any idea what the house supervisor does outside of the building, right? You say house supervisor, and that's, and you're kind of like the master sergeant in the military. I mean, ultimately, everything falls to you, right, before it goes up higher the chain of command. I mean, so you are the front line. And kind of the last, first and last kind of phone a friend, really, for the inpatient. So kind of describe, let's start with you, Jan, because I know you work more of the daytime than Michelle come to you as the night, but just kind of tell us what the house supervisor does.
Okay, if somebody asks me what I do for a job, I turn around and say I'm the administrative representative after hours, and I do bed placement and staffing. And I said, and then I'll tell people jokingly, I'm jack of all trades, master of none, because anybody brings their problems to us. We kind of figure out what's going on and how we can fix it, you might say. And so people will then go, oh, that's an important job. And it's like, well, yeah. But then I will tell our charge nurses, I'm doing the same job that you're doing for your unit, but I'm troubleshooting it for the whole hospital. So that's kind of how I summarize what goes on. And sometimes I'll say, I'm the last to know what is happening and not the first. Everybody thinks the house supervisor already knows what's going on, and no, we don't. We usually come in when there's a crisis and something needs to be handled.
I will. But the house supervisor is the source of truth on a lot of things.
We know a lot.
Yeah. Call the house soup. They'll know what's going on. Michelle, tell us about your kind of house supervisor role as, I don't want to say weird things happen at night, but weird things happen at night.
They do.
So particularly full moons, that whole cliche, but kind of tell us your role and what you do.
Like Jan, I tell people I'm the administrator when there's no administration here, which is kind of scary sometimes, but we make it through. I do weekend nights, 7 to 7, Saturday and Sunday, when there is no management here. And all things come through the house supervisor, whether we want them to or not. And you take that on your shoulders and do the best as you can to support them in making the decisions that have to be made with that. Just out of the ordinary things that come to you. I can't think of anything in particular, but they are off the wall, and it's usually, I don't know yet, let me figure it out.
Right.
And that's the biggest part of this role is knowing who your resources are and where to go to get those answers.
But so you say how you're the administrator, but you do realize that like 99.9% of the time when you call the administrator and call, they're like, oh, okay, what do you think we should do? Because it's something you're like, if you're me or Dave Phillips, you're like, what? Well, what do you think we ought to do? Because we trust your judgment. I mean, I really think the most talented people drift up to that. The role of house supervisor. I was telling Michelle, Jan, before you were fashionably late,
Yes.
which is not unusual. You were probably talking to someone before you got here.
No, I was trying to figure out where I was
Well,
located.
okay, well,
but,
yeah, you were talking to someone prior to that. But, I tell the young ones, the Gabbies and the Mollies, I'm like, why do you want this job? This is the hardest job in the hospital. Are you sure you want to do this? And I'm kidding around with them, but I'm also honest, because you're dealing with psych, 3 units. You're dealing with labor and delivery.
Uh-huh.
You're dealing with neonatology.
Uh-huh.
You're dealing with ICU. You're dealing with add-on ORs
Uh-huh.
when there's no spot to add them on.
That's true.
You're dealing with transfers. You're dealing with emergency room issues. And it's not only clinical issues. It's Michelle and I kind of talk. There's a charge nurse that's maybe have something going on in their life. Let's just say a life-changing event, divorce perhaps, or something that is affecting their job. You're solving that problem.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do. I don't think people appreciate. I think a nurse manager is hard. I think that's a hard job.
That's a hard job.
And the house supervisor is a nurse manager on steroids.
I never thought of that. But
It is.
I've always said nurse manager is hard because they're in the middle of it, upper administration and then their staff. So they get pulled in 2 different directions that way. So I think managers have a hard role in that sense. I think the house supervisor, yes, we do a lot of troubleshooting and it can be hard.
This job, part of the exciting part of it is trying to troubleshoot some of those things. I think it does take a special type of person to be able to do that. And like I was telling you, you have your finger on the pulse of just about everything going on. Some of the nurses appreciate that, and some of them are still kind of boxed into their own personal what's going on with them, whereas we have the whole big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that part of this position.
Yeah, if you're not a good critical thinker, I've known you both for a while, and I know that you are, you have to be, and you have to develop those skills quickly.
You have to have critical thinking, but you also have to have some common sense. Some of it really comes down to good common sense, in making your decisions. And then you are maybe applying, as you're dealing with your common sense, some critical thinking in the background of all of that also. But some people just don't have that common sense and critical thinking that you can put together to do the problem solving that's required in this job.
Early on in my career, I had the opportunity in Grinnell to be on the board of the hospital, and I thank Todd Linden, the CEO, for giving me that opportunity, 1 to 2 years out of training. And it really allowed me to understand that there's more to healthcare than me, that there's so much else going on, and there are all these moving parts. And you might think as a physician or a surgeon that you're important, but I'm not saying you're not, but you're just one part of this huge machine that is not only complicated, it's also sometimes very complex. Meaning, there's some things that are complex, but they're not complicated, right? But it's both. It's a complex organization and a complicated process too sometimes. And there's so many primary and secondary and tertiary stakeholders beyond the patient and the family that it really is a challenging job, and you guys do it well. And I thought with the pandemic that early on, particularly, people would appreciate the community hospital more than and not take it for granted, because there was this threat early on. You remember that, okay, wow,
they're overwhelmed.
The hospital might overwhelm and the healthcare system may collapse. That's why we had the shutdowns, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, blah, 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 right? And I thought, well, Dr. Deal and I actually had this conversation about it early on, that maybe it'll give people an appreciation that, wow, that community hospital is there when I need it, and I don't think about it every day, because why would I? And I think we went quickly through that phase, and now it's, I want to be politically correct or diplomatic or just kind in saying this, but I think patients and families are harder to get along with than they were in the past. I know that sounds
I
horrible,
disagree.
but it just seems like there's more, I don't want to say conflict, because that's not it, but just less harmony than there used to be. And I don't know if it's good. I'm glad you're saying that, Michelle, because am I just getting older and cynical? But But
Yeah.
it just seems like there's just more disharmony than there was in the past. And it worries me.
Yeah.
It worries me. I lose a little sleep over that.
Yeah. It feels like families, patients and families seem to be getting more and more aggressive. And I don't know if it comes from the pandemic that, we were always there and now it's expected that we continue to be there, which we are. But at the same time, they just want more.
It's an odd relationship. And like a lot of things in life, Michelle, there's probably not one. We're going to walk in a room, turn on the light, and say, "Aha, here is the problem."
Yeah.
That's not it. I mean,
Right.
it's multifactorial.
I agree.
But and we are planning on working on doing some violence in the hospital podcast, because I think we need to talk about that issue. It's a difficult issue to talk about.
It is.
Because you don't want to come off sounding like you don't like I love my job. I love the people I work with. I love the patients. I'm so blessed. But on the same token, things are changing, and we want to be sure that we can, react to it and protect our patients as much as we protect our families and our family, our staff. And they are a family. You spend a lot of time with people in healthcare. You become very close to your coworkers in healthcare.
They become your family.
They do. I mean, it's much like
it's your work family.
Fire and law enforcement, and there's other jobs where you just spend a lot of time with people, and they really do become your family. And you worry about them.
You have the opportunity to have deep conversations about deep subjects in this profession,
And we all take it personal when they get stressed.
Yeah.
At least, I do. I know you guys do, and you worry about them, because particularly the young ones.
I think society, with computerization and how much we get this instant gratification with the information that we get across our cell phones, across the computers, across everything, that I think everybody's used to having everything now so much quicker, and healthcare does not move quickly. It's more of a hurry up and wait profession, because we have to wait for results to come in. We have to wait to have maybe that consult physician come in. We have to wait. So people don't want to wait. They want instantaneous results.
I think you're right. I think
I think that's hard for people, as well as when our nurses are taking care of another patient, and one of their other patients calls them, they think they need them immediately, and they don't want to wait for the care of their primary nurse to give them. They want something now.
And in that waiting, it appears that we're not being transparent. We talk about transparency all the time. It appears that you're not being transparent when you don't have the results that you need. You don't have what you need right there, right then. So that, I think, plays into that as well.
I do think part of it also is the instant gratification or responsiveness. Everything's fast, fast. I think there is a percentage of the population that have to pay more out of pocket, particularly with the Affordable Care Act, these higher premiums, higher deductibles. So, now that they're putting their money on the line, it's a little bit more, they're more demanding, I think, on some level, because it's their money, and I understand that, I not a lot I can do about that, and I get it, but it just makes the job harder. I always get real defensive. I will try to look out for all my team members, but when people complain about waiting for a physician, I'm like, what do you think they were doing? They were taking care of another patient, or the nurse was slow to get in. Okay, that because there's another patient they were taking care of. It's not like they were, playing video games somewhere. They're hustling all the time.
Yeah.
Your average floor nurse he or she can hold about 1,500 milliliters in their bladder because they don't go to the bathroom. They're like, oh God, I get to go to the bathroom now. It's just always on the hop, and I understand if you're a patient, you're in the room. you don't see all that other stuff, and I get it. I totally
They
get it.
shouldn't see that.
No, they
stuff.
shouldn't really. I mean, but it just things are changing. I think we need to talk about it, be more open about it. We certainly need to be supportive of our staff at all times.
Absolutely.
The whole Vanderbilt case where the lady gave the paralytic
Mhm.
outside the, I don't think Vanderbilt did a nice job of supporting her. I mean, she wasn't a bad person.
No.
She was a bad situation, and a system that was there allowed that to happen. And when that happens, you have to stand up for your staff and say, let's fix this system, let's not blame the person.
I mean, most nurses will make a mistake sometime in their life, whether it's medication or something else. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to cause harm. But, that one time that it does, and it gets blown up into the media and everything else, and it goes to court, then that's the part that's hard. Yes, we do have people that may not have, they may have their own set of problems and maybe addictions and things going on that they don't make good calls when they're caring for patients. That's what we want to make sure, that everybody is safe. Our nursing staff is safe in our process improvement. We want our patients to be safe in the care that they receive.
Well, and that's another thing that people have a hard time understanding. Like you said, Jan, they want things to happen fast right away. Well, the reason it takes time is because there's safety measures built in there, so we don't order the wrong test or the wrong X-ray or give the wrong patient medicine. There's checks and balances and sign-offs and witnesses that this dose is correct, and pharmacy checks it. I mean, there's a reason why.
And it's become more so as we have advanced in healthcare than what we did when Michelle and I first started as nurses, many years ago.
Yeah, I did an interview earlier today with medical economics about patient compliance, et cetera, and we got into technology and had some discussions about that. And, we talked about how the electronic health records helped us out a lot, made some things really super easy, but it's also complicated some things too. Med reconciliation is it's a nightmare,
Yes.
because it went from a trifold list that people keep in their wallet to this dynamic list that's constantly changing because it's electronic now. It's not a piece of paper. It's hard to describe unless you're in healthcare, but sometimes it's just so complicated.
Yeah.
And there's so many variables to it that it's mind-boggling.
Not only that, we're asking our patients and families to make medical decisions that they may not totally understand the ramifications of that also. So that makes the healthcare, and not everybody understands what happens in the medical world.
No, and it has really nothing or very little to do with their level of education outside of this. I remember when my mother was dying and Dr. Cowden was taking care of her. She's in the process of dying, and he knew me. I didn't practice here then. I practiced in Grinnell, but Dave and I knew each other. And so he was really kind of talking to my sister during this,
Right.
And she's nodding her head, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, totally understand, yes. He walks out of the room, she turns to me, and she didn't understand a word she said. And it really didn't impress upon me that she's not a stupid person.
No.
She might talk way too much, which she does. And I know she listens to podcasts, so I will tell her that to her face as well, and she knows that. But here's an intelligent person that was not understanding, to me, what seems so basic. So it does make you stop and say, okay, medicine's really complicated, and don't assume that somebody knows something.
That, and can you explain it more in their language? So if they're a mechanic, you might not be a mechanic, but maybe you can relate it to certain parts.
And I would rather be criticized from the patient saying, well, of course I know that. Okay, great. Rather than walk out of the room and think that they understood what we were just talking about. And they don't. That's what's changed a lot too.
We put more on our patients and their families in the decision making, so that it doesn't always come back to us as the healthcare providers.
Yeah. And sometimes don't you think that we could probably do a whole podcast on how, and I think we do a good job of it, but we have to sometimes remind ourselves that, okay, I deal with end of life issues all the time in patients, right? So, but this family, their grandma's only dying once.
Yeah.
And they might not be handling perfect, but they don't have a lot of practice, and this is the one time, and so it has to move at their pace as far as decisions. Yeah. Well, we're covering a lot of depressing stuff. I really do want to tell people that this is a fun place to work. But you've kind of described what you like as being a house supervisor and the challenges it presents. What advice do you have for younger people that want to get into healthcare, or younger people that are in healthcare? What advice do you have them? If you could look back and say, this is what I wish I would have known when I was, 25.
I started my career in nursing as a nurse in the ICU. That was very difficult. But I think getting some med surge under my belt would have made me a stronger in the ICU than I was. But I found my niche when I went to the ER. I absolutely loved it. And that was part of the having a little bit about, because I did a lot of the charge role.
Right.
So I kind of knew a little bit about what was going on with each patient, not everything. And that, I think, kind of triggered me into wanting this position. So,
Jan, what advice would you give the 25-year-old Jan, who would just be 4 years younger than you are now? For the listeners.
Actually, I tell anybody that's a new grad, start out in medicine, get some good medical background, learn how to organize yourself, learn all about the medications, learn how to get it, just learning your basic medical background and get a good handle of that. Then move on to more of your specialty areas, whether it be step down, whether it be ICU, whether it be ED, anything like that, so that you're going to those areas with a knowledge base underneath. And then you can move farther, faster, and, take on more, and you will have a little more education under your belt, to take on those new expanded roles. Unfortunately, some of our newer nurses and newer grads want to start out where it appears to be more exciting. ICU is exciting because you have sick patients. ED is exciting because there's a lot of things that come in, whether it's people with just GI illness or flu, colds, an accident, chest pain, but then you get your traumas that come in, and those can be exciting because they're happening and that person's sick and you're trying to kind of beat the clock, or you're trying to save them and their life and get them moved on to the next place that will stabilize them even more. You're doing a temporary stabilization so that you can move them on to be admitted elsewhere in the hospital, whether they go up to the OR, whether they go to the ICU, or whether they go to the floor.
I think we're both saying that base knowledge is very, very important.
And then build upon it.
Yep.
And if anybody wants to do house supervisor, then you got to start working at doing charge, being proficient in that role, and starting to educate some of your newer, younger nurses and staff members by precepting on the units, because you're going to learn more when you precept somebody to your role than just being and knowing it right off the bat, because you learn as you go through.
When you're precepting someone or having a medical student shadow you, or a resident, or even a nurse, A&P student perhaps, or even an A&P, it just, for them to go, okay, why'd you do that? And you're like, that's a good question, because I've always done it this way, It's good. It makes you kind of continue that, because it is very easy to end up practicing medicine in a vacuum where you're not having those discussions with others. And that's one of the things I like about St. Luke's is I have colleagues I can discuss cases with and learn from them, or them ask questions of me and learn myself, in answering those questions. I think it is important to have colleagues that you can share cases with, because nobody knows everything. And it is constant learning.
And if you think you know everything,
that's
watch
the
out.
problem.
That's the problem, is right.
Yes, absolutely.
And
it is. You want you want people that. Who was I telling? Someone. You want the doctor. I was telling someone. I can't remember who I was talking to yesterday, but I was describing an orthopod that I said, I like him because he questions what he's doing to say, is this right for the patient? And they question themselves because they're like, is that right? Not every patient's the same. And I sent a lot of referrals to that orthopod because I just like how they are constantly kind of taking a look at their work and seeing if it could be better. And that's who you want to deal with. You don't want someone that thinks they know everything.
I feel like when you say, I don't know the answer to that, but let me look into it, that's huge. When you're talking to your colleagues, they know that you don't know everything, but that you're going to at least attempt to find the answer.
Yes. Donald Rumsfeld, he was Secretary of Defense, I think, or Secretary of State, I can't remember. But he had a business book when he was with IBM. But one of the things he had is learn how to say, I don't know, and say it often. Mm-hmm. And I think that is good advice that I've had to give myself at times in my career, because particularly as physicians, you think like you're supposed to know, and if you're not saying I don't know every now and then, well, then you're just not being honest with yourself.
I actually tell all new charge nurses when I work with them, I says, you don't have to know all the answers. You just have to figure out who might have that answer. It may be one of your coworkers who also does charge that on days that are there. It may be even a regular staff nurse, but it may be, neither one of you know, is there a unit that I can call that might know the answer? If not, okay, I'll call the House Supervisor to see if she knows the answer. I may turn around and say, well, no, I don't know the answer, but let's call this unit, let's call ICU, or let's call ED, or let's call 5 Centure, I'm trying to figure out who may have dealt with this situation in the past and go from there. If nobody knows that then it's like, all right, well, let's look it up and figure out. And it might be me having to call my administrator and saying, okay, I've got this situation on my hands.
Or in the end, you just go, okay, nobody knows what to do in this situation, so we're just going to do what's right for that patient.
And that's where your common sense might come in.
Yeah,
because
just
you
say,
kind of have that gut feeling.
Here's what we're
going to
do. It's the right thing for the patient. Let the consequences will be where they will be.
And I was going to say that earlier when we were on that subject, is sometimes it's like there is no policy. We've never had that before. We're going to do this, and we'll figure out what went well and what didn't and how we need to change it. And that's a group effort, and it's very much team-oriented.
It's the old saying, I've made plenty of mistakes, but never the same one twice. You learn from them. You pick your target. You fire your weapon. You adjust your aim. You fire again. You constantly are trying to get it right, and that's what I love about medicine.
And to just add on to Michelle's example, there is, okay, you may not know what the answer was and what's right, and you do what you think is right in the moment. Then you make sure we have a procedure or something coming up in the future so that we have something to follow. Because it may come up again, and you want somebody else to be able to do things right the next time. Yeah.
Isn't that the worst feeling, though, when you go to look something up? Like, now we have the internet, but, back in the days of textbooks, you're like, oh, I got to look that up. And you go in the back, page 637, and you go to 637, and you've already highlighted it at some point in your life, like 10 years ago, and you're like, I already looked that up. That's one of my frustrations, That happens, Jan, sometimes.
No, it does.
Michelle, Jan, this is great information. At first, I enjoy working with both of you, and it was nice to share what a house supervisor does. And I think, if anything, we've probably talked out of people of wanting to take the job of house supervisor. So job security for you too, because there's
but retirement's on the horizon.
Oh, Jan, you can't retire. What would you do? Just be at home with the dog.
Yeah.
Once again, this is Michelle Thompson and Jan Mussell, House Supervisors with St. Luke's Hospital. If you're interested in a career as a nurse or any other role at UnityPoint Health, please visit unitypoint.org/careers. Thank you for listening to Live Well Talk On. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your family, friends, neighbors, strangers about our podcast. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, be well.